I hadn't been back to Willow Creek in 25 years. Not since the day Grace packed her last box and drove away in that old blue Ford, her eyes fixed on the road instead of me. I told myself it was just land, wood, dirt, fences. But when she died last winter, the lawyer said her name was still on half the deed. So here I am, Robert Callahan, 58, retired engineer, widower, and coward, standing in front of a gate I swore I'd never touch again. The padlock was supposed to be rusted shut. I even brought a crowbar, thinking I'd have to fight it open. But when I wrapped my hand around the metal, it clicked like it had been oiled yesterday. That sound, the soft metallic sigh, ran through me like a ghost breathing against my neck. I pushed the gate and it swung open easy like someone had been waiting. The road should have been rough, cracked, maybe overgrown by weeds, but the gravel was smooth, fresh tire marks pressed into it, a trail leading downhill toward the barn. And there were voices, laughter, the kind of laughter you hear from kids who don't know what silence costs yet. I froze. For a moment, I wondered if I'd taken the wrong turn, if the years had twisted the landscape the same way they'd twisted my memory. But the old windmill was there, still leaning, still stubborn. The oak tree where Grace used to hang the swing was thicker, scarred by time. Everything else, though, painted fences, trimmed hedges, even smoke rising from the chimney felt wrong. This place was supposed to be dead. I took a few steps forward, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, and the smell hit me lavender and baked apples. Grace's scent. I hadn't smelled it in decades, not since that morning she told me she needed space to breathe. I used to think that was her way of saying goodbye. Maybe it was. Maybe not. A dog barked from behind the barn, and then a woman's voice called out steady and sure, "You must be Robert." My chest tightened. Nobody should have known my name here. The sun slid between the clouds, lighting up the white porch rail like it had been painted just last week. I stood there clutching the gate as the wind carried the sound of laughter, again closer this time, clearer. Something about this place had been cared for, loved, protected. And my wife, the woman I thought I'd buried with my regrets, had something to do with it. I followed the sound of laughter down the hill, each step heavier than the last. The closer I got to the old barn, the stronger the smell of fresh paint and hay became. The place used to creak like a dying man. Now it hummed with life. Someone had fixed the roof. The doors were wide open, and sunlight spilled over a row of wooden benches, a work table, and a dozen mason jars filled with wildflowers. There were people here, maybe 20 of them. A few men were stacking firewood, women were stirring something in a big pot outside, and a group of children chased each other between the trees. They looked happy, careless, as if this place had always belonged to them. My first instinct was anger, an almost childish flare of it. Who gave them permission to be here? A woman in her early 50s noticed me from across the yard. She wore a faded denim shirt and a wide-brimmed hat. Her movements were sure, like someone used to leading. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward me smiling, though her eyes studied me carefully. "You must be Robert Callahan," she said. "Grace told us you might come someday." I felt my throat close. For a second I couldn't tell if she was mistaken or if I'd stepped into some dream where Grace still existed. "You knew my wife?" I asked. "Mara." She later told me her name nodded. I did. Everyone here did. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the barn. "This is her place." Her words hit like a hammer. "Her place," I repeated, almost laughing. "Grace hasn't been here in 25 years. Mara tilted her head, still calm. "That's not exactly true." She looked toward the children playing near the pond. "Your wife built this place, Haven House. She started it 15 years ago. We provide housing therapy and safety for families who've lost someone. Veterans, single parents, kids in foster care. Grace's idea was simple: turn grief into ground that grows something new." I stared at her, feeling the air drain out of my lungs. The name Haven House sounded soft, almost kind, and yet it scraped against every piece of my memory. Grace had left me, said she couldn't breathe under the weight of what we'd lost. She'd taken that same pain and built this. Mara must have seen the confusion on my face, because she added quietly, "She never stopped talking about you, Robert. Or Emily." The name froze me. My daughter's name. I hadn't heard it spoken out loud in years. Mara nodded toward a nearby cabin. "Come in. There's something she wanted you to see." Inside the cabin was bright, warm, and full of small details only Grace could have left behind. A framed sketch of the oak tree hung by the door. On the shelf sat an old mug with my initials on it, the one she'd accidentally cracked the day we buried Emily. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and cedar wood. Mara opened a wooden chest near the window and lifted out a box neatly tied with a ribbon. "She left this for you. Said it wasn't time until you came back." I took the box, my hands trembling. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it carried a lifetime. Through the window I could see the pond where my daughter had drowned. The afternoon light shimmered across its surface, and a group of kids splashed safely in the shallow end, laughing, each one wearing a bright orange life vest. There was a rope barrier stretching across the water, 2 adults standing watch with whistles. Grace had rebuilt everything we lost just safer this time. I wanted to be angry, to call it betrayal. But all I could do was whisper, "Why didn't she tell me?" Mara said softly. She tried Robert. "You just couldn't hear her back then." I looked down at the box again. My name was written across the top in Grace's handwriting, steady, familiar, patient. And for the first time in 25 years, I wasn't sure if I'd come back to close a chapter or to finally start reading it. The box sat on the table between us like it was alive. I didn't open it right away. My fingers traced the grain of the wood, the ribbon still perfectly tied after all these years. Grace always tied things neatly, as if tidiness could keep the chaos away. Mara didn't say a word. She just poured 2 cups of tea left, one in front of me, and stepped outside. The screen door clicked shut, and I was alone with everything I'd avoided for half my life. When I finally pulled the ribbon loose, the smell of old paper and lavender drifted out. Inside were dozens of envelopes stacked in order, each one labeled by year. The first was dated 2001, the same year Emily died. My name was written in her handwriting, the curves steady, the ink faded at the edges. I opened it carefully. "Robert, I don't know if I'll ever send this. You stopped talking last week, and the silence fills every corner of this house. I thought grief would make us cling tighter, but instead, it's pushed us apart. I still make coffee for 2. I still fold your shirts." Her words cut through me like wind through a broken window. I'd forgotten how quiet our home had become after the accident. I used to sit in the garage at night pretending to fix things just so I wouldn't have to look at her empty chair. I reached for another letter, this one from 2004. I drove back to the creek today. I thought I'd hate it, but it's softer now. I met a woman there. Her husband drowned the same year Emily did. She said she can't stand the sound of water anymore. I told her I feel the same. Maybe if we face it together, it won't swallow us. I rubbed my eyes, the words swimming. That must have been how it began, her need to help others, to do something with the pain. By 2007, the handwriting changed. The letters grew longer, steadier, full of plans. "There's a small barn for sale near the old windmill. I think I could turn it into something, a place for people like us. I'll call it Haven House. Maybe one day you'll understand." Understand. I didn't. Not then. I was too busy running from ghosts, too proud to see the woman standing right next to me. I read until the sun began to set. Each letter carried another year of her life, fundraisers, volunteers, families who came broken and left a little less so. Sometimes she wrote about me, small details that made my chest ache. Robert still sends Christmas cards through his office assistant. He signs his name with that same careful R. I keep them in a drawer. I think he still loves me, just from far away. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She'd written to me all this time, but I'd stopped writing to her long before she ever left. The last envelope in the box was different. No date, just a pressed lavender sprig taped to the front. Inside was a single line: "If you ever come back, follow the sound of laughter. That's where I'll be." I stared at that sentence until the ink blurred. Outside, I could hear the kids playing again near the pond, their laughter carrying through the dusk like a promise she'd kept. A memory hit me hard. Grace teaching Emily how to swim, her voice gentle but firm. I'd told them I was too busy. That day had a project deadline. By the time I drove home, the ambulance lights were already flashing against the water. My throat closed. For the first time in decades, I said her name out loud. Grace. It sounded foreign, fragile, like it might break if I spoke it wrong. The screen door opened. Mara stepped back and her expression soft. "She believed you'd find your way here someday," she said quietly. "She left Haven House in your name, too. You're part of this Robert, whether you wanted to be or not." I looked back at the letters, at the neat stack of years between us. "I spent 25 years trying to bury her," I said. "Turns out she spent the same 25 making sure I'd find her again." Mara smiled gently. "Maybe that's what love really is. Stubborn." Outside headlights cut through the trees. A truck door slammed. Two voices, familiar ones, echoed across the yard. "My sons." The rumble of a truck engine broke the quiet. Headlights cut through the dusk as two familiar figures stepped out. My sons, Ethan and Caleb. Even after all these years, I could still see traces of the boys they once were beneath the men they'd become. Ethan reached me first. His suit jacket was slung over one shoulder, the kind of casual confidence that comes from living in boardrooms. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, didn't think you'd actually come back here." Caleb followed quieter, his boots scuffing the gravel. He looked thinner, older than his 30 years. "I didn't either," he murmured. I tried to steady my voice. "I didn't plan to." Things changed. They both glanced around the barn lights, the laughter from the cabins, the smell of food drifting through the air. Caleb frowned. "Who are all these people?" Before I could answer, Ethan muttered, "Looks like squatters. Christ. Dad, you left the gate unlocked." Mara stepped out from the shadows, her calm presence somehow cutting through the tension. "Evening," she said with a polite nod. "We're not squatters. We live here. This is Haven House." "Haven what?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp. "Haven House," she repeated steady. "Your mother built it." Silence. The kind that makes the night hum. Ethan turned to me, incredulous. "What is she talking about?" I swallowed hard. "It's true. Grace started this place after she left." Caleb's brow furrowed. "Wait. Haven House, the therapy retreat, the one for veterans and families. That was Mom." Mara nodded. "She founded it 15 years ago. We help people who've lost someone. She said it was her way of turning grief into something that could grow." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "You're telling me Mom took our land, our family's land, and turned it into a charity?" Without saying a word, "You realize how insane that sounds, right?" Caleb stepped closer. "Maybe it's not insane. Maybe it's the first thing that made sense to her." "Don't romanticize this," Ethan snapped. "She walked out on us, on Dad, and now there's a bunch of strangers living here. This property is worth millions." "We could stop," I said quietly. Ethan's head jerked toward me. "Stop what?" "Pretending this isn't a mess." "No," I said. "Stop talking about your mother like she was a thief." He exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm being practical, Dad. That's what you always wanted, right?" Caleb shot him a look. "You call it practical. I call it hollow." The space between them tightened, the air thick with years of unspoken blame. They weren't just arguing about land. They were arguing about her, about me, about everything we never said when she was still alive. Mara broke the silence softly. "Grace wanted this place to belong to all of you. Maybe you should see what she built before deciding what to do with it." We followed her down the path toward the main hall. Lanterns glowed along the trail, lighting the gravel like scattered stars. Inside the walls were lined with photographs, families smiling, veterans planting gardens, children learning to swim in the pond. In the center hung a plaque that read, "Haven House, founded by Grace Callahan in loving memory of Emily." My throat burned. Caleb reached out, tracing our daughter's name. "She built this for Emily," he whispered. Ethan crossed his arms, jaw tight. "She used Emily's death as a fundraiser. I can't—" "She used it to save lives," I said firmly. He looked away, eyes glinting. "You always took her side." "I didn't," I said quietly. "That was the problem. I never took hers when it mattered." For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was wind through the trees and the faint laughter of children outside, alive, safe, joyful. Then Mara handed me a small flash drive. She made a recording, she said gently. A few months before she passed. "Grace wanted you all to see it together." I turned the drive over in my hand, the metal warm from her touch. Ethan stared at it like it might explode. Caleb just whispered, "A recording." Yes, Mara said, her last words to you. I looked at my sons, one guarded, one wounded, and felt the weight of every year we'd spent apart pressing down on me. Then I guess I said quietly, it's time we finally listened to her. We sat in the main hall after the others had gone to bed. Only a single lamp glowed in the corner, throwing long shadows across the wooden floor. Mara set up an old laptop on the table, slipped the flash drive in, and stepped back without saying a word. The screen flickered, then came her voice, Grace's voice. Hello, Robert. Ethan. Caleb. My breath caught. I hadn't heard her in years, not outside of memory. She was sitting on the porch I recognized from one of the cabins, wrapped in a wool blanket, her hair thinner, face paler, but her smile still the same quiet warmth that used to undo me. If you're watching this, she said softly, I'm probably gone. I didn't want this to be a secret, but I didn't know how to make you understand while I was still here. So I left pieces of myself in this place instead. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the screen like it might change. Grace looked down, then back up again. I blamed myself for years for Emily for what happened that day. I told her to wait for me at the dock while I went to grab a towel. It took less than 5 minutes. That's all it took. And after that, I couldn't breathe inside our house anymore. Every corner echoed her laughter. Every room smelled like her shampoo. I thought distance would help. It didn't. I pressed my palm to my mouth, shaking. I'd told myself for decades that she'd left because of me, because I couldn't hold her together. But she had been breaking long before she walked out the door. Grace went on. One day I met a woman at the creek. She'd lost her husband in a car accident. She said she came here to scream where no one could hear her. And I realized that maybe grief isn't something we escape. Maybe it's something we share. The camera tilted slightly as if she was shifting to breathe. So I started Haven House. With the first check I got from selling my clinic, I bought the old barn. I wanted a place where people could rebuild the pieces of themselves that loss had scattered. I wanted laughter here again. And maybe someday I hoped you'd find it too. Her eyes softened as she looked straight at the camera. Robert, I know you were angry. I was too. But I never stopped loving you. I kept writing even when you stopped reading. I felt Caleb's hand on my arm grounding me. Ethan sat stiffly, jaw clenched, but his eyes were glistening. Grace's voice trembled now. Ethan, you were always chasing the next success. I used to think that meant you were strong. Now I know it's because you were scared. Scared to stop. Scared to feel. You don't have to run anymore. Ethan looked down at his hands. His knuckles were white. And Caleb, she said, smiling faintly, you carried too much. You tried to save everyone after your sister, even me. It's okay to rest now. Let this place carry some of that for you. Then she turned back toward the pond. The camera followed her gaze. Children were laughing in the background, the sun bright on the water. If you ever come back here, she whispered, listen for that sound. That's what healing looks like. The video froze on her face, soft, still at peace. No one spoke. The room felt smaller, heavy with everything we hadn't said when she was alive. Ethan broke first. She blamed herself, he murmured. All this time, and we blamed her. Caleb wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She didn't want forgiveness. She just wanted us to keep going. I nodded slowly. And maybe this is her way of making sure we finally do. Outside, the wind carried a faint echo of laughter from the pond, the same sound she'd spoken of. For the first time in 25 years, it didn't hurt to hear it. Morning came quiet and golden. The mist rolled off the pond like breath, and for a moment I could almost see her there, Grace kneeling by the water, checking the life vests, counting heads. The memory didn't sting this time. It just stayed, soft, present. Ethan was already outside, standing by the dock. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled high. He looked different, lighter somehow. I called the firm, he said, without turning around. Told them the land's off the market. If Mom built something worth keeping, I'm not the one who's going to tear it down. I didn't answer, just stepped beside him. The water shimmered in the morning sun, and for the first time, we were silent without anger. Caleb came down from the stables, a boy riding one of the therapy horses beside him. They asked if I'd stay on, he said, brushing the boy's shoulder. Help with the veterans program. I think I will. Mara joined us on the porch, her hands in her pockets, watching the kids gather for swim practice. "She'd be proud," she said quietly. I nodded. "No," I said after a beat. "She'd just tell us to keep working." A light laugh rippled through the group, and for the first time I laughed too. The sound surprised me. It had been so long. When the bell rang and the children ran to the pond, I opened the gate, same one I'd walked through the night before. The hinges creaked, familiar and kind. The world beyond it looked brighter, wider, alive. Grace once wrote that grief doesn't end, it changes shape. Standing there, I finally understood. Some gates aren't meant to close. They're meant to open again when you're ready to walk through. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.